Three tourists were feeling the rush of wind gushing in their faces. Empoy, Wilbert, and Norman were riding an all-terrain 4x4 vehicle or ATV in the bush near the Chocolate Hills in Carmen, Bohol, late at night when the machine malfunctioned. They tried calling the rental company, but they did not get a quick response. They decided to trek on foot when they came across a man mauling a girl who was tied upside down to a gnarly tree branch. The old man was hitting the girl all over her body with a whip made from the tail of a stingray, which the locals call latigo, and was telling her to spit out the black chick so that she could be freed from the evil curse. "Spit it out, now," he shouted. Wilbert, a gay cross-dresser, quickly reacted. "Oh my goodness, this is violence against us, women," he said in his overacting feminine action. "No, this is violence against them. You're still a man as far as we're concerned," Norman jokingly said while keeping his eye on the old man. "Let's help the poor lady," said Empoy as he motioned Norman on to confront the old man. Norman, who was chewing gum, stood up, and the two followed him and approached the man from behind. They were able to restrain the man and free the disoriented girl. The man explained to them, "You're making a mistake. If the black chick that her Manananggal had forced her to ingest remained in her body, she would turn into a Manananggal. You must be a crazy man," Norman responded. "Let us tie him up to the tree. And here are some ants to punish you from your evil deeds," Wilbert said while putting the stick full of ants near the old man's feet. Wilbert gently pinched the man's cheek. "You're lucky you're cute, uncle. If not, I'll slap you for hurting a fellow woman like me. You will be responsible for this terror," the old man yelled. Empoy noticed that the girl was gone. Where did she go? "Maybe she was jealous of my beauty and decided to go away," Wilbert mentioned while flashing his pink outfit. Norman begged them to go home because it was late and most importantly he was already hungry. Norman is a chubby guy who's always hungry. "Yeah, that girl knows how to go home. Let's go," Wilbert added, and they went back to the Airbnb house that they rented. A few hours later, still tied to the tree, the old man suddenly woke up to a ticking sound directly above him. He looked up and immediately cried out in terror. Norman and Empoy ran into a beautiful lady at the market. Empoy immediately recognized her as the girl they had rescued the night before. "Did you happen to be the girl we saw in the woods?" he inquired. The lady was apprehensive and tried to avoid Empoy. She did not respond to him and she ran away. Empoy fell head over heels in love with the lady. His pupils dilated and his heartbeat increased. He was smitten by her long black hair, brown skin, and mysterious face. Norman teasingly sang a song while taking a bite of some guavas while dipping it into some salt they bought earlier. "Let's follow her." Empoy motioned to Norman to follow him. "Are we going to tie her up as well?" Norman jokingly asked. "I want to see where she lives," Empoy said. "But she surely lives in a remote house near the jungle," Norman guessed. Sure enough, they followed her to the outskirts of the city near the forested area. They were too exhausted from the long walk when they bumped into some locals. "Are you following Isabel?" they asked. "Is she married?" Empoy asked. "No, but it's not safe in this place," they said and advised them to leave. "Go or else you might not be able to return home," they warned them. Empoy decided to continue, but Norman protested. "This place is weird, besides, I'm getting hungry." He touched his tummy and continued. "We still have to cook this fish. Let's go back," he was adamant. Empoy hesitatingly agreed and muttered, "Isabel, now I know your name. I want to serenade Isabel at her house," Empoy said while strumming a newly bought guitar. Norman asked him, "Do you know how to play that guitar?" "No," Empoy scratched his head and laughed. "Since no one knows how to play the guitar, let us do it in a millennial style using TikTok song and dance." "I will lead the dancing," Wilbert haughtily said. After practicing, they decided to go to Isabel's house. On the way, they saw a funeral. Wilbert convinced the two to gate crash the funeral first because there were many good-looking guys around. Norman immediately agreed because he's hungry, and in the Philippines, funeral goers are usually given food by their host. They overheard stories that the dead was actually killed by a Manananggal and the liver was missing from its body when Mangdaman, who was the village spiritual healer, was found tied in a gnarly tree near Isabel's place. Wilbert's eyes opened wide when he heard it, and he was not able to finish the macaroni soup that was offered to them. He whispered, "Let us leave this place." They all looked at each other and agreed. Norman put some biscuits in his pockets, and they decided to go to Isabel's house. After almost an hour of walking, they arrived at Isabel's home, a single-story hut with no electricity. It was the only man-made house in the woods. Dried nipa leaves, rattan, and bamboo make up the structure. It was very remote and surrounded by banana, nara, and mahogany trees. Isabel walked up to the window and rested her right arm on her chin, gazing at the full moon. Empoy saw her and was stunned by her beauty. "What do you see in her that you don't see in me?" Wilbert asked. "Woman. Let me guess, maybe she's a real girl and you're just a wannabe." Empoy quickly responded, "Besides, her mysterious look attracted me." "You're so cruel." Wilbert pretended to be hurt but was really just trying to be cute. "I know you, Mr. Playboy. This girl will be one of your victims." Norman smirked as he lit to the last piece of the biscuit from his pocket. The three hid in the bushes and peeked at Isabel through the open window. Unbeknownst to the three, Isabel knew that she was being watched. She moved away from the open window. Empoy motioned that they can start the serenade. He took his smartphone and searched for the saved TikTok video in his gallery and played. He also maxed the volume. As planned, Norman and Wilbert danced to the tune of Ronan Keating, "When You Say Nothing at All," while Empoy was lip-syncing. "It's amazing how you can speak right to my heart. Without saying a word you can light up the dark. Try as I may, I could never explain what I hear when you don't say a thing. The smile on your face lets me know that you need me." Isabel gave them a blank stare as she looked at them through the window. After the singing, she invited them in and urged them to remain for a bit. She offered them food, which they politely declined because they had already eaten a lot at Mangdaman's burial, with the exception of Norman, who devoured all of the boiled bananas that had been served to them. He also dipped them in salt that he had in his pocket. Empoy wondered in shame. "You bring salt everywhere." "We bought some from the market, remember?" Norman answered. "It is my habit to put some in my pocket since there are a lot of tropical fruits here." Wilbert noticed that he also had some garlic from his pocket. "You eat raw garlic?" he asked. "That is my maintenance for my hypertension, so I can eat what I want," Norman said as he put the cloves of garlic back in his pocket. Isabel seemed allergic to garlic and salt, so she left the house and told them she would get something they could take home. "This is weird," Wilbert whispered while holding a sweet potato. "It took her a lot of time to prepare this coffee and boiled sweet potato, but it is not hot anymore." He got the feeling that Isabel was trying to delay them. Empoy got irritated and warned, "Don't insult someone's hospitality." "It is almost midnight," Norman remarked. "Looks like something is wrong," said Wilbert as he stopped pounding his feet. Empoy stood up and guessed Isabel might be in danger. "Let us look for her." He then stepped out of the house. The two had no choice but to accompany Empoy because he was paying their vacation expenditures after amassing a fortune through trading cryptocurrencies. Norman picked up the boiled sweet potato that had fallen from his grip, despite the fact that he had a lot of it. "There she is." He pointed to the direction of Isabel using his lips. "What is this strange woman up to in the middle of the night?" Wilbert made a remark, but his voice sounded scared. Empoy wanted to allay the fear from the two, so they peeked at Isabel, who went to the banana trees near her house. There they saw Isabel stripped of her clothes and applied oil from the carabao's horn all over her body. They were all shocked at the sight. Empoy attempted to cover Wilbert and Norman's eyes with his left and right hands. Wilbert simply hid his face behind his hands. "I don't want to see this, it's horrible. I want to see a nude man instead," Wilbert whispered. Norman removed the hands of Empoy as he was taking a big bite of the sweet potato, but spat out what he had in his mouth when he saw that Isabel was convulsing. Empoy and Wilbert were equally horrified as well by what they were seeing. Isabel's body sprouted two massive bat-like wings. Her mouth revealed a very sharp and dreadfully long sharp tongue while producing a tiny ticking sound repeatedly. Then the upper half of her torso separated from the lower part of her body and she flew away. For a little while, the three stood frozen before sprinting away. Empoy ran the fastest among the three as Wilbert was having problems with his dress clinging to some shrubs, while Norman was distracted, picking up the sweet potatoes that would fall from his hands. Then they heard a tiny ticking sound from above, followed by a loud flapping of wings. Wilbert and Norman were able to catch up with Empoy, who rested under a mahogany tree. "Do you still know the way back?" Wilbert cried. Empoy shrugged his head and shouted as he pointed to something on top of the tree. "Look," he said. The Manananggal was there clinging on a branch and looking at them intently. She was grinning as if she was telling herself that she would have a feast that night. She flew closer to the three, but Wilbert was quick to take the sweet potatoes from Norman and threw them at Isabel. "I am the queen of the night," Wilbert angrily said, hitting her twice. "My food," Norman protested. It was at this point that Empoy directed them to run, which they did as fast as they could. Norman no longer picked up the sweet potatoes falling from his hands. Wilbert was no longer mindful of his outfit being ruined by the thorns of the shrubbery. They found themselves back at Isabel's house while Isabel was in hot pursuit. It was only then that they realized that they were running in circles all this time. Norman collapsed on the front door of Isabel's house. Empoy and Wilbert wasted no time, and they immediately picked him up and dragged him inside the house. They scrambled to close all the doors and windows and barricaded it with anything that they could find inside the house. The sound of Isabel's flapping wings and her ticking noises was deafening. They were all shaking uncontrollably and were cowering together in one corner when suddenly, the sound stopped. It was then that Wilbert saw Isabel's evil face peeping on one of the open crevices on the bamboo walls. She's looking straight into Wilbert's eyes. She is grinning, almost like smiling, revealing her sharp teeth. You could see the delight in her eyes to see her prey cowering in fear. Wilbert almost fainted at the sight. Empoy and Norman scanned the roof and saw that it's made of dried nipa grass. Isabel could just easily claw her way inside if she wanted to, but the predator was toying with her prey. Isabel silently made a small hole on top of the nipa roof of her house. She knows the nooks and crannies of this house, after all it was hers. She peeked inside and saw her three victims cowering just below her. Her bloodlust together with the ecstasy of the hunt is so overwhelming. She couldn't contain her joy as she slowly opened her mouth near the hole. It was at this point that her tongue slowly extended down the hole. The lower her tongue goes, the thinner it gets until finally, it's now directly behind Empoy's ear. Empoy collapsed to the ground convulsing. His eyes became totally white and his body seemed suddenly severely dehydrated. Wilbert and Norman cried in fear while trying to attend to their friend. It was at this point that they noticed something like a straw attached to Empoy's ear that goes to the roof of the house. As soon as Norman grabbed it, it moved violently as if it was alive. Norman did not let go and grabbed it with both hands. Seeing what's happening, Wilbert roams the house to find something to cut it. It was not long when he found a knife and proceeded to cut it. Blood sprayed down on them almost immediately, followed by Isabel shouting in pain. She got more ferocious and is now hell-bent on finishing her prey. She forcibly tore into the dried grass roof of her house and dove into Empoy, who's barely breathing on the ground. Instinctively, Norman and Wilbert ran the other way, going to the back door, and frantically removed the barricades. Once the door was open, they bolted into the banana trees. Not long after, they both trip over Isabel's lower half. They looked at each other, and without talking, Norman took all the salt and garlic in his pocket and poured it on Isabel's innards. Wilbert scrambled on the ground and did the same, but instead of salt, he poured soil, rocks, and anything he could grab from the ground. Isabel drained Empoy's body before turning her attention to her two other targets. She flew out of the hole on the roof and was shocked to see Norman and Wilbert next to her defiled lower half. Not only that, the two were looking straight at her and were flicking their fingers. She went mad with anger. She vowed vengeance. Not only will she kill these two, but also she would go to great lengths to wipe out their families. She was salivating at the thought when the first light of dawn hit her. She has to go back to her human form. Norman and Wilbert were flicking their fingers to Isabel when she was hit by sunlight. They saw her hesitate for a minute and then burst into flame. It looks like a burning huge bat spiraling down the ground. The smell of a barbecue emanates from her burning flesh. Norman told Wilbert to go ahead and get help. "I'm hungry," Norman whispered to himself.